Hello, Tyler from Transmitter Solutions here. Today we have a new version of the Pulse. It's the Ethernet Pulse. And what makes this better than the other two Pulses is that it's much faster connecting through an Ethernet cable, so you don't have to wait for dial-up on the modem Pulse. And for the difference between the Ethernet cables and the USB cables is that it's much more reliable using an Ethernet cable, and these cables can go up to 100 meters, which is about 328 feet. It's much further than a USB cable, which is up to a maximum of about 16 feet. And I think the biggest selling point about this Pulse is that it requires no software installation. It's all built into this Pulse, and there is no drivers that you have to install, and I highly recommend it. So today I'm going to show you how to program a 433 transmitter to your Pulse, and we'll go through some of the main features on the site manager through your web browser. So let's get started. So the first step I'd like to take is to power up this Pulse. I'm going to plug it in, and while it's booting, I'll tell you about the requirements. So our first requirement is that the Pulse requires a 16.5 volt AC transformer. Without that, there's not enough power going to the rest of the board. The next requirement is that it requires a shielded cable. Without the shielded cable, we won't get a lot of distance out of our readers, and there'd just be too much interference going through these cables, and it absolutely requires a shielded cable. So when the Pulse finishes booting up, it'll show you this menu here. So we'll have the Pulse name and the time and the date. This is when you know it's on standby. And so the first step that we have to take when using the Ethernet LAN is that we have to set it up, Ethernet port is that we have to set it up to LAN mode. So we have 4 buttons down here, A, B, C, and D. We have to access the control menus manually. So I'm going to push D, A, and then we have password right here. The default password is 11111. So you can use A to scroll up, B to accept and go to the next digit. So I'm going to push A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. So now we're in the menu. I'm going to go down to, let's see, let me get a better angle here. Config. I kept pressing A until config. I'm going to push B. I'm going to go A. Let's see, we'll go to COM parameters, and I'm going to go down, keep pressing A until you get to RS-232 mode, and we're going to go B. Now it's at modem right now, and that's for the modem version. We don't want that, we want LAN. So I pressed A, and you can scroll through the menu, and I'm going to go to LAN, and I'm going to push B. So it's selected, and now we have to exit the mode. So I'm going to push D to get to this menu, and we're going to exit. So I'm going to push A to the exit menu, and B. So I exited the menu, I pressed B, and I pressed B again, and now we're back at the standby mode. So after we're done with that, we will connect our Pulse via Ethernet cable. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for you. And I'm going to connect the other side of the Ethernet cable to our computer here. And now we are ready to use to program our Pulse on our computer. So I'm going to switch to the computer, and I'll show you the different menus and how to access the Pulse from there. So once we're on our desktop, you'll notice that we don't need this site manager. This is for the Pulse with the modem and the Pulse with the USB. For our Ethernet version, you have to use a browser. So you could use Internet Explorer, you can use Chrome, and you can use Firefox. For our specific example here, we're going to use Chrome. Let me load that up for you. And in our address bar, I'd like you to type in 192.168.1.1. Once you do that, press enter, and you'll go into our login area. So we have 3 types of users: user, configurator, and guest. User has limited access to the data, and so does guest. But if we want admin access, then we'll have to choose configurator, and we can make changes from there. The default password is 11111. So go ahead and type that in. It's the same as your pulse. And this is the section for controller data. This is for those who are connecting your pulse via a RS-485 network. So you can connect multiple pulses together, and it's a little bit confusing because you have to physically change the addresses of each pulse. For this one, we're going to connect to the master pulse, which is 001. So keep that the same. And the default password is already entered in for you, but the default password is 01234567889. So we don't change anything here. And we'll push connect. And now we're connected to our pulse. So up here at the top, we can exit. We can log out and exit. We can change our passwords. We can disconnect from the master pulse. And then this is information on our controller, pretty much our pulse. So let's go to the first menu here. So in the first menu we have these three sections. We have controller data, we have anti-passback, and then we have scheduler options. The most important thing that we have to take note is this controller data. This is the first step that we'll need to take in setting up our pulse. So we have 4 relays on our pulse, and we have, on each relay we have the different operation type. So pulse, it'll switch on, and then after like 2 seconds it'll just switch off. We have step, where when you activate the relay, it'll click on, and then you'll have to either scan a card on your Wiegand, or you have to activate your transmitter again, and then it'll read it again, and then it'll step off. So it'll fire on, and then until any input, then you'll fire off. The third one is timed. For this one, you could set the amount of seconds at how long you'd like your relay to hold before it turns off. So for all 3 of these, I'm just going to use pulse, or for all 4 of these, I'm going to use pulse. And then this is the most important part here, the reader. So each relay is assigned to C different types. Our options here are RF, Wiegand, and pretty much Wiegand 2, so these 3. RF is radio frequency, and this is what picks up our transmitter signals. If we're going to want our transmitter to work on all 4 relays here, then we have to set all of these readers to RF. For example, this relay 3 here, if we don't change this and we try to access relay 3 with our transmitter, it's not going to work because it's only set to read Wiegand 1. Same with relay 4, it's only set to read Wiegand 2. So I'm going to set this to RF, Wiegand 1 and Wiegand 2. So it's going to try to read everything. The relays will search for all three signals. So it'll search for a transmitter, it'll search for a Wiegand input on the first slot, and it'll search for a Wiegand input on the second slot. So relay 3 and relay 4 will work for both Wiegand readers and the signal. So we're going to set it to that. And you know, for this particular guide, I'm going to show you how to program a transmitter. I'm not going to show you how to program the Wiegand, but it's the same concept. If you're going to only use Wiegand, then you're going to want to change, you know, Wiegand 1, Wiegand 2 to each of these relays. So once that's done, you can push save. For here, quickly, I'm going to tell you about anti-passback. Unless you don't know what this is, it's for example, it's a security option. So here we have Wiegand 1 in, Wiegand 2 out. So you have to scan Wiegand 1 before you can use Wiegand 2. And it has to go in sequence, otherwise the pulse will block everything. So I recommend you push disabled. There's not a lot of situations or scenarios where you want anti-passback. And if you do, the option is there. And then we have scheduler options. You can set 9 different schedules just in case you have like a pool you'd like to give limited access to, then you can set those, but for time's sake we're going to skip that and we're going to click save. So once that's saved, I'm going to go back up here and we're going to go back to menu. We don't want exit, we want to go back to menu, and we'll go back to the main menu here. So that was controller configuration. We want to go to controller lists. So we have 3 different options here. There's transmitters. Hang on, let me go back to menu. You can't use the back button, it's not going to work. So I'm going to go to controller list. We have transmitters, weekend cards, and batch operations. So let's go to transmitters here. And we're going to add our first transmitter. So I'm going to push new. And you could set the schedule that we were talking about earlier. I'm going to have no schedule for this one. It's going to be enabled. You can enable or disable it. And then button A will be for relay 1. I'm going to do button B for relay 2, button C for relay 3, and button D for relay 4, because we have a 4-button transmitter here. So I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to enter in the code here. So the code, I believe, is 001 and our number is 12284. And so we have RF user and RF master. If you choose RF master, then you can program the pulse using your transmitter, and further instructions are in the manual. And so once that's entered, we now have access and it's all programmed. We're going to push save. So then we'll go back to menu. Now we've entered in our transmitter data. You can go here and you can add weekend cards. So from here you can use the scheduling, you can use different card formats depending on what type you'd like. For this example we're going to use 3-5 because that's what we use at this company. But I'm going to add different card numbers here, and that'll work for your weekend cards. You can save here. This is a fake number, by the way. Let's click OK. So I'm going to go back to the menu and we're going to go to batch operations, and this is where you can add multiple users. So for example, we want to add 001 1000 as the first code, and then we want to go to add the last code, so that would be 001 and 2000 or 20,000 here. So we'll go 10,000 to 10,050, and when we do that, it'll add users 10,000 to 10,050. You can do that for transmitters and you can do that for weekend cards, so that's pretty useful. And you click here to add the transmitters, so I'll go ahead and add this one here as an example. So let's go back to menu and we'll go to the events history. From here you can read all the data. You can set in your date parameters, and it'll update every so often. You could do that. You could read event. Right now it looks like we have some data on our pulse from when I was messing with it before, and right here we have the most recent data. It's where we change configurations here. You can export events to Excel spreadsheet. We're going to skip that for now. And then we have utility here, so we can test the LCD. If I click on this, our pulse will beep and it'll show a test and on our pulse, and it looks like it succeeded. I did see a light up. And we can set the time here. This is important. It'll set the time to your computer, so when you click on it, it says operation successfully executed. That means the time is synchronized to your computer, and then you can back up and restore here. And you can save it to your desktop or wherever you want. Okay, so those are the options we have on our Pulse Manager. It's pretty much all it can do. And when you're done with all these options, you can click exit and it'll log out. And that's how you use the Pulse Manager on our browser. So it's pretty simple, product to use. It's not too bad. It's much easier to use than the Site Manager software and configuring all the driver problems and all that. And if you're looking for something really simple, if you don't mind paying the extra price, then the Pulse with the Ethernet extension or the Ethernet adapter is the one for you. It's really good. If you have any questions, please visit us at www.transmittersolutions.com and you can call us from there.